Hey, I'm Felissa Rose, and you're watching Keto and Crime.
Before I was a graphic designer at Crate & Barrel. Before I spent hours creating designs for products. Before I put my type skills to work, I studied visual communications at the Illinois Institute of Art.
Visit artinstitutes.edu/stories and learn.
Here's got it all. Great career, family, and her dream home. A few years ago, here's what she didn't have. A degree, or the time to earn one. She needed a convenient way to earn a bachelor's degree. So where'd she go? DeVry University Online. That's where she found DeVry's free how-to guide to earning an online degree in everything from business to technology. DeVry's got more than 70 years experience with career-focused education, and now the most interactive online program around. That means more personal feedback from professors, more connections with your fellow students. You could even mix and match, take classes online, in a classroom, or both. But wherever you learn an in-demand online degree from a university employers respect. So call or visit DeVry Online now. Their free guide to earning a degree online.
Hey everybody, Keto Comic here. Welcome to White Collar Crime Wednesday. Today we are covering for-profit colleges. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because I attended a for-profit college, I taught at a for-profit college, I was a department chair at a for-profit college. So this is something near and dear to my heart, and it's also something that I'm very passionate about, and I have flip-flopped on this issue many times, so it's something I'm uniquely qualified to speak on. So I thought I would just incorporate this into White Collar Crime Wednesday because there have been crimes involved in this genre and a lot of people defrauded. So let's get into it. First of all, Keto, what is a for-profit college? Well, a for-profit college is basically a new iteration of a trade school. That normally these colleges gear their educational programs toward what would have normally in days past be considered a trade. So think of things like auto mechanic, auto body, practical nursing, medical assisting, dental assisting, culinary arts, all things that are somewhere between white collar and blue collar, kind of that light blue collar where skills where you work with your hands, your mind, but you still make really good money. So their college is geared toward that type of education, known as career education. They don't waste your time with general education courses, liberal arts courses, things that a lot of people consider worthless. Instead, they teach you how to do a certain thing. And believe it or not, they have been around since 1846, when some business schools were formed in some of the larger colonial cities. Even just after the Revolutionary War, colleges to teach business, trade, shipping, valuable skills that the colonies actually needed to survive. So for-profit colleges have been around many, many years. However, their modern era started in, as we know them today, those flashy commercials you see during daytime television. The modern era of the for-profit college started in 1976 when John Sperling founded the University of Phoenix. And the University of Phoenix is by far the biggest of the for-profit colleges. It is still around, though not as big and powerful as it once was. It grew at its heyday to over 200,000 students, which is more than the entire university system of California and all the Ivy League schools in the Northeast combined. So it was huge. And they also are credited with pioneering the idea of online education, which has now become a standard. Even at most state universities and community colleges now offer online courses. So University of Phoenix and the for-profit college model can be credited with starting that whole trend. So you may be thinking, why is this even a crime? Why is this even a thing? Well, like a lot of things that's done in excess, they just got out of control. So let's go back to how these things got started and what the end result was after everything shook out. So basically, as I said, the for-profit college model has been around since the 1800s when they were specifically used to teach trades and skills that the colonies and communities needed to survive, and they were ran on the premise of you paid, whether by barter or cash, for your education. And usually there was a hefty profit left over. Well, that was technically the model all the way through the 1980s when these things really exploded in popularity and things started kind of spiraling out of control. They made a small profit while training people to do trades and career type training that allowed them to go out and get specific types of jobs. So education wasn't geared toward thinking one to think like a normal, like liberal arts education. It was teaching them to do a certain skill. And that was a very valuable thing. And most of these colleges made a decent profit doing that. However, in the 1980s, with the economic downturn that started in 1989, and also with the uh, explosion of the student aid program, these colleges started to see that they could make more than just a decent profit. So they started sort of raising their tuition to meet the limits of federal student aid, including student loans. So when federal caps went up, their tuition went up because they realized that students wanted this training and they would pay whatever it took to get it. Whether that means going in debt for $200,000 or $10,000, students would pay the tuition. So you started seeing not just private individuals starting and running these schools. You also saw investment firms like Goldman Sachs, who actually owned a big chain of for-profit colleges, one of the ones I work for. They saw the real benefits in these companies and they started running them for maximum profit, not just a small amount of profit. So that means steadily raising tuition to meet federal caps. That was the first thing. Also, with our country kind of turning away. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, old enough to remember, but when I was in high school still taught trades. You could take your academic classes in the morning and go learn how to weld or lay brick or be a cosmetologist in the afternoon if you wanted to. Well, public schools started turning away from that, and so did the country in general. Suddenly, working with your hands and learning a trade was no longer a sought after endeavor. It became more about getting the traditional college education. So you saw state schools and even community colleges start to add more liberal arts and basic college courses as opposed to tech and trade schools. So there was a real lack of skilled trades. On top of that, during the 80s, you saw the collapse of most trade unions, which trade unions provided apprenticeship programs which taught people things like construction, electrical, plumbing, masonry, things like that. So when those kind of collapsed, all those training programs went away, and suddenly there was a shortage of skilled trades. Well, these for-profit colleges saw that need and saw there were people that still wanted to learn to do those sort of things. So they started creating programs overnight because these were corporations, privately owned companies, where they could literally do changes on a dime. Whereas at a state college or a community college, it sometimes takes years to develop a new program or a new curriculum. Whereas at these colleges, somebody could say, hey, we need to start a dental assisting program. That's a hot career. Well, we don't have one. Let's start one. They could literally take staff members and experts in the field of dental assisting, lock them in a hotel. I exaggerate, but lock them in a hotel over a weekend, and by Monday, they've got a curriculum for a dental assisting program. That's how quick these things could move. So you saw these starting to jump in to fill that need, and enrollment absolutely exploded. So that, given with the federal loan system and financial aid system rising, as well as the GI Bill, which is what veterans use to go to college, they added all these new programs that were in demand and also raised their tuition so that they make the maximum amount of profit. So along with these factors, you also had a new insurgence with the No Child Left Behind protocols, even though that mainly dealt with high school. It really instilled a belief in most people that everybody needed a college education. So you had literally had people just working what would have normally been a high school graduate's job, now needing a degree to do it. And with all of these, like for example, pharmacy technician. Pharmacy technician is one of the associate degree programs that these colleges came up with, that in past you could have been trained by a pharmacist to be a pharmacy tech without ever going to formal training, but now you have people thinking you need a formal education in it. So you had new licensure requirements and things like that. So there was a need of people that would have just been trained on the job now have to go to college. So a lot of, same with culinary. I have a culinary arts degree from one of these for-profit colleges. My mother worked as a chef for 20 years. Never taught or took a single culinary class. She was self-taught. Whereas when I came up, you had to have a degree to be a chef. So it's just how things change, how everybody thinks everybody should have some sort of education. So that whole phenomenon started. And you had these colleges literally explode. You had Strayer, University of Phoenix, ITT, DeVry, Kaplan, Berkeley, it just goes on and on. The Art Institutes, Argosy, it goes on. And so you had these colleges branching out into just about every type of career you can think of. And then you had for-profit graduate schools starting were to get professional degrees such as doctorates in education, law degrees, PsyDs. So you had these for-profit colleges kind of stepping out of the career college aspect into more academic. So they were all over the place. And with this new resurgence of people thinking everybody had to have a college degree, you had the community colleges and the state colleges getting overcrowded, literally having to shut their doors when they were filled up for terms. So these students that wanted to go to college and were too late to enroll had nowhere to go. And again, these for-profit colleges were there to fill that gap. And again, they pioneered the whole aspect of online education, whereas state colleges and community colleges kind of clung to the past and kept people in the classroom. These colleges learned they could accommodate more students, again, for profit, by putting them into online courses. So every single course that could potentially be taught online that didn't have a physical lab requirement or something that required hands-on began being taught online. So you had certain courses like paralegal, even certain types of secretarial that could be taught fully online without a student ever having to set foot in a classroom. So you had these colleges taking over, doing that. So they became very, very profitable, and Wall Street saw this, and so you had these colleges popping up all over the place. And they offered degrees from what you call a diploma, which was like a 9-month program, all the way up to master's degrees. And these programs varied in expense. A 9-month diploma program at the Art Institute, which is where I taught, was about $15,000 for a 9-month degree. The 2 years associate's degree was about $30,000, all the way up to a bachelor's degree, which was $80,000. Now think about that. That's far more expensive than any community college, any state university or college, or even a private nonprofit college. So tuition at these things were astronomical, but they justified this by saying that you're being taught by professionals actually working and thriving in your fields rather than just an academic. And that's true. A lot of instructors at these colleges, I was one of them, I like to think are very good instructors that actually know their field. So there is that advantage. And also most of these colleges, instead of just being, you pay tuition, then you pay books, then you pay room and board, usually their tuition involved your entire starter kit. Like for the culinary program, your entire knife kit. If you went to game design or computer design, you got your laptop and your scanners and everything else you needed for that. So it was kind of all inclusive. But still, if you priced all of that out, usually you were paying about 5 times what it would truly be worth. So These things were very expensive and accommodated a lot of different degree paths. But you may be thinking, so what's the problem? Well, a lot of the problems started, particularly during the Obama administration, when they began questioning statistics that showed that students that went to these types of colleges only made up about 12% of college students in general. But yet, they made up 50% of students that defaulted on their student loans. Now, I don't know if you know this, but student loans are not bankruptable. Once you take them out, they're yours until you die. So there's no getting out of a student loan. What they were noticing when they did like surveys and studies, that half of all student loan defaults were from 12% of the college population. So they knew something was wrong. So they started investigating these for-profit colleges, and what they found out was that their admissions advisors were anything but. These colleges employed salespeople.
There's only one thing counts in this life. Get them to sign on the line which is dotted.
Glengarry, Glen Ross. It's that sort of a heavy commercial environment in which you say whatever you need to say to close the deal.
The pressure to grow encouraged dubious enrollment practices. Tammy Barker was an enrollment advisor at Ashford University.
They used to tell us, dig deep, get to their pain, get to what's bothering them, so that way you can convince them that a college degree is going to solve all their problems.
To enroll students, paid them a commission to do it, and punished them when they didn't meet quotas. So as you can imagine, it was in the best interest of these sales reps, if they want to keep their jobs, to exaggerate certain things like salaries, placement rates, graduation rates. So they lied to students to make themselves look good, saying that, okay, for this $30,000 you're going to invest for this 2-year degree, you're going to come out and start making $60,000, where in all reality, the starting pay and average pay for that career might have been $12 to $15 an hour. I can tell you as an instructor in a culinary program, I had students tell me that their advisors had told them they'd come out making $40,000, when I knew full well, graduating from a culinary school, you're going to start as a line cook, because I was a chef for over 10 years. I'm going to start you out at about $13 an hour. So again, lies like that. And the return on investment for college, you should at least make in salary what you take out in student loans within 2 years. So if you take out $80,000 for your education, you should make $80,000 by the second year into your career. That's a good rule of thumb. And if you're not going to do that, the degree isn't worth the price that you're being charged. And if you go down the road to the community college or the state university, you can probably find the same degree for about 1/3 of the cost. So that was number one problem. Number two problem was the fact that they exaggerated even their graduation rates. The graduation rate at most for-profit colleges on average is about 20%. So only 20% of the students that start actually finish their degree at all, whereas they were telling people that they had a 75% chance of graduating. That was another problem. Third problem was the types of students these colleges went after. Normally they went after what would typically be considered an underserved community, such as minorities, single moms, people just out of prison, and people that had recently been laid off, which is why these colleges absolutely exploded during the recession of 2008. They absolutely doubled their student population because people were going back to school because they had been laid off. And they targeted these people, lied to them, and got their money. And then when they got out, they either had a degree that no one took seriously, because a lot of these colleges didn't have the right types of accreditation. When it comes to colleges, there's two types of accreditation. There's regional accreditation and national accreditation. Most of the time, your state universities, your private nonprofits, your community colleges are going to be what we call regionally accredited. by the Department of Education. The Department of Education vests power in certain types of accrediting boards that go out and make the determination of whether a college can be accredited or not. So you had most of these, with the exception of a few. Argosy was regionally accredited. University of Phoenix was regionally accredited. Those were the only two that spring to mind right now that are regionally accredited. The rest of these, what you call nationally accredited, whereas there's only about 6 regional accrediting agencies. That's how long they've been around and how they're the top tier of accreditation. There's only about 6 of those. So it's quite a challenge to get regionally accredited as a college. National accreditation, however, there was about 40 accrediting bodies for that. And so most of these career colleges were nationally accredited. So when you have schools that are regionally accredited and schools that are nationally accredited, and you want to transfer from one to the other, it doesn't work. It's like, that they repel each other. And a lot of these colleges would lead students to believe that if they wanted to get their associates here and then go on to a bachelor's or a master's degree elsewhere, that would not be a problem. Well, when they applied to a university or a public college or even a private nonprofit, their credits wouldn't transfer because it wasn't the right type of accreditation. On top of that, a lot of these national accrediting boards, and I can name one, ACICS, the logo you see right there in the middle, the Accrediting Council of Independent Colleges and Schools, they actually had their accrediting power stripped away from them because they were found by the Department of Education to be using inferior standards or not inspecting at all. They weren't the only ones. So you had a lot of these national accrediting boards lose their right to accredit from the Department of Education. And once they lost their accrediting power, all schools that were underneath their umbrella lost theirs too. So you had problems with accreditation. Then comes 2009, where you enter what I call the final nail in the coffin, and that was the Obama administration putting into effect Gainful Employment Act. The Government Accounting Office, after they did their audit of these colleges and realized that what they were promising students was incorrect and the salaries that these students could expect compared to their student loan debt didn't jive. Also, because a lot of these colleges had questionable accreditation, both as a school and as within programs, sometimes even if a school is regionally accredited, each program has to be professionally accredited by professional associations. For example, a law school would not only have to be regionally accredited, it would also have to have American Bar Association accreditation to hold water. So you had things like that. Not only was the school's accreditation in question, a lot of their programs weren't accredited by the professional association of which that student's career fell, if that makes any sense at all. So what you had was a lot of students not only not completing college, but also not being able to get a job in their chosen field because their programs didn't have the right accreditation. So they're still working minimum wage for basically no money, and certainly not enough to pay back hefty student loans that they were taking out. On top of that, these schools were also inflating their placement rates. For example, they said that some schools would say they had a 75% placement rate. Corinthian College, which was a big chain, one of the first of these to actually get in trouble and go down in 2012, Corinthian College was telling people that they placed 80% of their paralegal students with law firms. Come to find out, that was really closer to 10%, and how they were inflating those numbers were they were literally bribing law firms to hire their students, and then once they were hired, they would work a little while, then they would fire them because they didn't know what they were doing. And then they would actually pay the legal firms a retainer to hire their students. That was one way. Another way was to exaggerate what the students were doing for a living, such as if a student got a job in a coffee shop that was located within a building in which a law firm was also located, that was considered being placed in the field of paralegal.
getting a degree.
No doubt. And tonight, federal regulators are warning consumers about DeVry University and misleading claims DeVry has made to get students in the door. Our consumer investigator Jennifer Krause tells us what the national chain of for-profit schools did that got it into trouble.
DeVry University was sued today by the Federal Trade Commission for misleading consumers. According to the FTC, DeVry stretched the truth when it advertised just how well its students do after they graduate. According to the lawsuit, DeVry exaggerated the numbers of its graduates who get well-paid jobs in their fields. DeVry claimed in ads that 90% of its students got new jobs in their field of study within 6 months of graduating. But federal regulators say while impressive, it's not true. Turns out in coming up with that 90% success rate, DeVry counted students who'd already been working at their jobs before even enrolling at DeVry. And the company even counted students who were not working in their field of study, like a student who specialized in health services management at DeVry, but who was working as a server in a restaurant. DeVry is the third largest for-profit school like this in the nation. It has dozens of campuses around.
So you see what I'm saying? They were lying about their placement rates. So the Government Accounting Office saw all this, and they decided to put forth some standards by which these colleges had to abide. And that is, they had to show the students' salaries were large enough to pay back their student loans within 2 to 3 years of employment. They also had to show at least 45% successful, reasonable placement within their job fields. Now, even that to me sounds low. But when this came into effect, you had these colleges panic, and they got their PACs and their lobbyists involved to try to water this down. You had 2 senators from Illinois and Iowa leading the charge against these for-profit colleges. And so there was a battle for a couple of years. And finally, these rules did go into effect in 2011, but they were severely watered down. Still the same standards, as they had to show 45% successful placement rate, but they could miss them 3 times within a 4-year period. So you had some of these colleges continuing to limp along until 2012, when Corinthian was found to be bribing law firms and other companies to hire their students, as well as continuing to inflate their inflation rates. And the Department of Education literally told them, you're on suspension. You can no longer qualify for Title IV financial aid, which means no student loans, no Pell Grants, nothing. And as a result, Corinthian College closed its doors in 2012. And this continued to spiral. Between 2010 and 2018, 40% of these career colleges went out of business because of gainful employment and because of whistleblowers and people really exposing them for the bad things they were doing. So Corinthian started it. Then you had ITT closed down, also ripped up its ability to get financial aid. After that, you had EDMC, Education Corporation of America, which owned Argosy, the Art Institutes, South College, Sanford Brown, closed down. Then most recently, in 2018, you had Virginia College and Education Corporation of America closed down. Many of them are still in existence, but they are severely a shadow of what they were. Basically, a lot of the ones that the 60% of them that are left had to kill programs that didn't meet the Gainful Employment Act. So if their dental assisting program was not showing 45% placement, it had to go because students couldn't get financial aid to go for it, therefore effectively neutering the program. You can't get financial aid. Most of the lower income students that these colleges targeted, they had to close them down because there was no way that they could pay their tuition. So you had a lot of these colleges losing their most profitable programs because they couldn't successfully place graduates. So this industry has effectively been neutered. Even though under the Trump administration, Betsy DeVos has lifted a lot of the gainful employment rules, a lot of these colleges are still limping. They're here, but they're not really as big and as prominent as they used to be.
Also, you have to realize that a lot of these online colleges pulled kind of a quick trick And instead of just closing or obeying the law, they took the path of trying to almost disguise themselves as nonprofits. For example, the EDMC sold the Art Institute to the Dream Academy, which is a nonprofit that helps inner city students with career choices and stuff. And that worked for a little while until that part of the Dream Institute went bankrupt as well. There were also some other colleges that, instead of selling to a nonprofit, tried to rebrand as a nonprofit. That also led to more scandal and more bad press. And finally, some sold to more traditional colleges, such as what you're looking at. This is the president of Purdue University, basically telling about the deal that they underwent to buy the struggling for-profit college Kaplan, which is now known, as it merged with Purdue, it's now known as Purdue Worldwide, or and Purdue Online. So these for-profit colleges, like I said, are still around, but a shadow of what they used to be.
Now, what were the result of a lot of these court cases? Well, most of them were just an attempt to shut down these schools, which was very successful. A few of them, like Art Institutes and ITT, did have to pay class action lawsuits, settled out of court for millions of dollars, also effectively helping it to shut them down, which I believe that was the whole purpose of it, to shut them down. I think they realized that a lot of these had become nothing but diploma mills and cash grabs, so they wanted to get rid of the bad players. And they got rid of 40% of them. I think probably the worst players in this industry. But that's the story of the for-profit college scams. You ever been contacted by one of these schools? Normally, when you reach out to one of these schools, even if you just ask for information, they will literally call you 20 times a day trying to get you to enroll. So I guess the whole purpose of this is, do some things need to remain privatized? Or state-owned? Education, I don't necessarily have anything against education for profit, but I think we should need to be reasonable in that it needs to be a proper education, it needs to be reasonable profit, and it needs to be subject to the same types of rules as state schools. That's my opinion on it. What do you think? Let me know below if you've had an experience with any for-profit college, a good one or a bad one, because there are some success stories out there, of course. But let me know. I'm interested in what you think. Anyway, thanks for bearing with me. Remember, like, comment, share, subscribe. Ketosis, y'all. Keto Comic. Out.